Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 140 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me. And Joe, it's a transfer portal update. We've been recording a lot of state of the programs. We haven't reacted to some of the breaking news that has happened in the portal. And if you know what we're talking about, great. Here's some more analysis. If you don't, it all happens really quickly. We are 17 days 15 days, something like that, from the national championship. And Joe, I'd say 80% of the top players are committed and signed to their new places, roughly. Not, don't do the math on that, but almost everybody worth it at the top of the sport knows their new school. So we're going to go over some winners, some losers, and then we're going to talk about some of the unfinished storylines here, as a couple of the top players are still undecided about where they're playing next year. So, Joe, we'll go back and forth. You'll throw out a winner. I'll throw out a winner. Who's your first winner of the transfer portal?
I'm going to go with the great white shark, Brian Hodgson. Providence, man. Talk about a program. When Ed Cooley leaves, a lot of turmoil. I think Kim English was an exciting hire at first. I think they had a pretty good first year, should have been in the tournament. And then ever since then, Sean, 2 years underperforming, just absolutely mind-boggling collapses toward the end of games. And that's a program, Sean. Only 4 years ago they won the Big East. They almost took down Kansas in the Sweet 16. We've had a lot of friends go there. I think they're one of the more sleeping giants, to be quite honest with you, in the Big East if they're run correctly. But Providence immediately gets Miles Bird in the portal. They bring in I believe a G League guy as well, and then Sean, they go out and get Devin Vanterpool from FAU, who I think's 85 in the field, 68, but I think he's a lot better than that. So Providence is loading up here, Sean, and the reason I mentioned them first is the Big East is a land of opportunity.
Yep.
UConn is what it is. St. John's obviously has won. They've swept the conference tournament and the conference regular season 2 years in a row. But kind of that third fiddle's up for grabs. Villanova's not really set their feet quite yet. Marquette's declined. Creighton's in limbo. I think Providence year one can make a huge jump and position themselves to be third or fourth in this conference.
Yeah, there's a huge power vacuum there, Joe. And I think if you do want to expand it, like the Big East is a winner so far. Like a lot of the mid range teams in the Big East are doing well. Even DePaul, they got Mangoon Guath somehow. I don't know how Chris Holtman did that, but this is a Providence talking point. They clearly are well funded in terms of Big East teams. I think they're probably third. But look, like you said, Kevin Willard is able to put his team of, you know, band-aids together. He was hired super late. He still took them to the tournament easily. So I think a tournament appearance is definitely on the table here. Joe, they have a few more ads from the ones that you said. Dink Pate was the G Leaguer. They get Gavin Hightower from USF with Hodgson. Vanderpool Bird, like you said. They get Arrington Page from Northwestern. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. They get Samson Alaton, the Yale center, and then they get Ryan Sable from Buffalo, one of the best guards in the portal. They also do keep Ryan Mella, who is a good, sort of wing for them this year. I think Providence is probably deserving of starting next year in the top 25, at least for me. But Hodgson, obviously a good X's and O's coach anyway. It appears that he's going to have a pretty talented team year one up there in Friartown.
Yep, and I guess to end this segment, Sean, Providence, that press conference, I know he used that quote at USF, but his recruiting abilities, that's all I'll say about that, are definitely up to par so far.
Yep, he's doing a good job, and I think that I'm really happy that he picked Providence because they are a basketball fan base that is united against their last two head coaches. So I think they need some positive reinforcement here to get them back into the mix, and I think they will. All right, Joe, my first winner is going to be a team that needed to fill every single player off of last year's team that was pretty solid, that went to the tournament and beat Brian Hodgson's USF in the first round, and that's Louisville, if I'm not mistaken. Now, they did get somebody back who was on their team last year. He did enter the portal. That's Adrian Woolley, big time. he will be joining Jackson Shelstad, Flory Badunga, Carter Knox, and potentially Alvaro Fulgaris. Now you got to fill out the back half of this team, and the bench matters a lot too. But they have two of probably the top 10 players in the portal coming in with Shelstad and Badunga. They were able to add Knox, who's a pretty solid winger, and they are operating as if they have unlimited funds. Now they don't. They're probably somewhere in the 20 million range, but Pat Kelsey is going to have a lot of talent once again. But Shelstad missed most of last year, wasn't really a factor. Really solid first 2 years for Oregon. But Dunga is all set to go to the NBA draft. And Pat Kelsey pulls him right out of there and gives him a check that is going to be more than what a 10th to 20th round, 10th to 20th overall pick would get guaranteed in the NBA. But Joe, there's still some more things to do for Louisville, but you have to like what they started with.
I'm a big fan of what Louisville's done, and I think Sean, the external pressure is not just the quarter zip I'm wearing. We've seen coaches now very early on in their tenures win national titles. I believe Todd Golden was year 4 last year when he won it. Dusty May year 2. And not that Pat Kelsey or any of these recent hires who've gotten their teams in the tournament have done anything wrong, but the idea is there, right? If you get the right fits in the portal, if you get especially those guys like Badunga, maybe not so much Shelstad, but definitely Badunga, guys that could have won the first round or early second round. You get them to come back to school for a high price, and they develop and play like a lottery pick all year. That's the separator between a lot of these teams in the Final Four, Sean, like Michigan and Arizona, versus some of these teams that barely got into the second weekend or just failed to get to the second weekend. I think Louisville's taken note of that.
And obviously, Pat Kelsey has gone in and taken a team off of Kenny Payne's hands, who was tragically horrible, and he's brought him to the tournament 2 years in a row. But there's a little bit of impatience starting to brew in Louisville, and he's not going to get fired or anything like that. But that is why they went so hard with the great NIL that he got this year. Like they are going to be in the top five according to Jeff Goodman, and I think that they are primed to. We talked about a little bit of a power vacuum there in the Big East, Joe. How about the ACC? One of the two big powers has a new coach. The other one is losing pretty much everybody off of the team that just went to the Elite Eight. So is there a little bit of a power vacuum up at the top of Tier 1 of the ACC? With a little bit of a strong middle of the pack, I think there might be a chance for Louisville to raise up and compete for the title.
It's an interesting point, Sean. We'll probably rehash that more in the offseason. I think there could be a lot of arguments one way or another, but I think the opportunity is certainly there in the ACC, is what I'll say.
All right, Joe, let's go back to you for your third winner. Or your second
Sean,
winner, third overall winner.
yeah, Sean, I'm actually going to pick a team in the SEC who might not be quite done yet. And that's the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yep.
You know, they've added plenty of really good guys. Terrence Hill Jr., the most recent one, he's trying to get more people there. Jalen Harrelson, Miles Rubin, Day Day Ames, and a transfer from Belmont. Rick Barnes. I think this will probably be his best offensive collection of talent while at Tennessee, and I believe they retained. I'm blanking on they're starting Powell or blanking on him. But the bottom line is, Sean, we don't know what Nate Ament's going to do. We don't know what Juke Harris, who's down to Michigan and Tennessee, is going to do quite yet. So I'm also going to factor in that they might bring back or bring in someone else who's really, really damn good and who could be a first round pick in 2027. So should Tennessee, it was Bishop Powell or what, that's who they're
Boswell,
bringing
he's
back.
out. He's out.
Boswell.
Yep,
Oh, he's out. Oh.
he's going to play for Buzz Williams in Maryland.
Oh, well, my mistake. But
Yep.
regardless, Sean, the Tennessee Volunteers looking very dangerous, along with Texas, too. I know you're probably going to name them, or we'll talk about them certainly as a sidetrack. The two UTs in the SEC are not playing around, right? And Tennessee's not been a program that's lacked success. They've won SECs recently under Rick Barnes, SEC tournaments, and they've been to three straight Elite Eights. That's really, really good. But Tennessee's still vying for that Final Four. I think this team could be the one that puts them over the edge. Should they get Juker? I doubt they get a med back, but if they do, man, like this is the team to do it.
Yeah, they This is an interesting collection of players so far, Joe. I think a lot of people are starting to take the Michigan approach from last year, which is get a lot of good players and figure it out. Right? Last year we talked about going into the season, is Yaxel really going to play the three? Merez isn't a four. Mara is not going to be able to start at the five. He was terrible last year. Well, look what happened. It worked out. If you have good players, they're going to be good players. I don't know if Rick is doing it to that extent this year, but he I think fit is less of a concern for Rick Barnes, and maybe that's a good thing here because they have not had the consistent offense that they've needed to compete at the top level. Now, they've been awfully close, like you said, three Elite Eights. I don't think any of those games were particularly close. Um,
Only Purdue was semi-competitive.
yeah,
The other two were absolute massacres.
so look, I think this is something that we talked about. They've already given out as much money as they were rumored to have. Now, that means it is starting to become a thing that teams don't want these agents to know how much they actually have because then they'll push for a bigger percentage for their players, all that. But I'm not sure Tennessee has enough to get another huge player. Now, they might be able to scrap some donors together and get it, but they still have a bench to fill out, too. I really like what they've started. Hill was awesome against North Carolina in the tournament for VCU. Harrelson is somebody who was an extremely highly rated recruit and scored the ball very well for Notre Dame. Miles Rubin is somebody who has been a nice development player for Loyola Chicago. Day-Day Ames is a good guard, and then you have Tyler Lundblade, who is an excellent shooter from Belmont. Like that is a good nucleus, I think. Of course, a top of the line player would really turn it around and probably make me rank them in the top three next year. But if it's not Juke, Joe, which it's leaning not, I feel like there needs to be somebody to tie this thing all together. And if there's not, I don't know if they take a step. But
Well,
but great job so far, though. This is a really
yeah,
good start.
absolutely. Yep, and TBD on a bet. We're sure shooting
Yeah,
this still before he's made up his full mind. He'll definitely go through the combine and whatnot, but
and and
TBD there.
and this is obviously a really different year when it comes to NBA draft. Like this year's draft is unbelievable for how many prospects there are. There's like there's a 99% chance that if Amen was in the draft last year, he'd go. Like not a question. But the 15th pick gives you roughly like $4.5 million next year. There's NIL deals for more than that. So not only could you make more money next year, but you could also get drafted higher the year after that. So I think that's what we're starting to see with some of these. If you were going 15th in the draft up until this year, you were gone. Now, maybe end of the first round, you had some people coming back, but this Amen situation is very odd, Joe. There hasn't been much, right? Other than he's thinking about it, and Tennessee is, trying to plan around him coming back, him not coming back. I don't know what's going on there, but like you said, it's this video is going to release right after we're done. So unless there's news tonight, which I don't think there will be, they're going to have to wait for Nate Amen, and I think a lot of teams are going to wait for these draft guys, Joe. And potentially, could there be a late domino to fall after the draft? I know your team is going to be on that, trying to do that like they did last year with Yaxel, but Tennessee's great start to the portal, and I think they're a few away from really building a good team.
Yep,
But
Sean. So Sean, who's your second winner?
let's go back to the Big Ten, Joe. I'm not going to say my team, although we are going to talk about them later. Let's talk about the Illinois Fighting Illini. And they're not here on 3, so I am trying to look. Here they are. Okay, they do only have one incoming transfer, Joe, but they have a couple of key returners that were rumored to be transferring all year and ended up not. Their one transfer so far is Stefan Vox, the lead guard for Providence this year. He was awesome, unbelievable scorer, fits the mold of the European. But the reason why they're a winner so far is because they have not really had to participate in the outgoing part of the transfer portal. The Iviciches are back. Andrei Stojakovic is back. David Merkovich is back. It's pretty clear, Joe, that next year is going to look a whole lot similar for Illinois.
I agree. And the big thing too, shot is they bring in a really good high school recruiting class again.
Yep.
And if you look at 247, they separate out between recruit, transfer, and then composite. And Illinois is still pretty high up in there. This is the most success Illinois has had in 20 years. So let's see how they pivot off. I think Stefan Box is a perfect fit for this system. I think bringing back Stojakovic, and uh, I think that's a game changer for the Illini as well. So,
And Jake
Sean,
Davis
I
they bring
think,
back too.
and Jake Davis, yep. So I think with that, Sean, you're looking at a real top three of the Big Ten between Michigan, Michigan State, and Illinois. And right now, based on we're shooting this still pretty early on. Michigan hasn't made too many moves in the portal yet. That doesn't mean they won't. But right now, if I had to pick who's going to win the Big Ten, I'd probably pick Illinois right now.
If it, to simplify it, Joe, it's Wagler and Boswell out and Vox in and the freshman
Yep.
in. Like I and then Humrickhouse is out too. I believe he is out of
Mhm.
eligibility. So will they? I bet they'll bring another player or two in to fill out their rotation. But like I don't think like running it back for them, 80% running it back is all that bad. Like he made the final four, and I think that
No.
their Vox is definitely a better player than Boswell, and I think is pretty comparable to Wagler, to be honest. He's a bigger guard, very isolation based, can hit a bunch of threes, can get past anybody, can't really guard. Look, Wagler couldn't really guard either. So, um, do you want a little bit of a better perimeter defender? Probably somewhere out there. But I like what Illinois has done so far. In the age of retention, Joe, I think I heard somebody talking about this, and I don't remember who it is. But if I do remember, I'll say it. The 4-and-8 rule is something that has very uh, worked with three of the four Final Four teams. The only team it didn't was Michigan. Four of your top eight players in the rotation, if they return the next year, you're set up. And I think Michigan, I think four of the rotation were back from the year before, and then you hit some transfers. You
Three, yeah.
obviously
Mhm.
three. So look, you had a couple of NBA players. You bought low on Mara. You bought low on Cadeau.
Mhm.
Stock went up there. Look, that's why the rule didn't apply. But they're going to have that. So I like Illinois' chances going into next year.
Yep. Sean, I'm going to keep it right in the Big Ten here. We talked about him briefly. Buzz Williams in Maryland. Very underwhelming year one. We mentioned in other videos. I really think they packed it in January. Maybe not so much in public, but kind of
Yeah, they
based on their
just
injury
yeah.
situation. But talk about an impressive grab. Six transfers and then four high school recruits. One five-star as well. Uh, Sean, Mike McNair, DJ Wagner, I really like Bishop Boswell, who I mistaked earlier, Robert Jennings, and then a big from New Mexico. This is a team that I'm expecting not to compete like for the Big Ten or anything nationally, but be competitive to get back into that NCAA tournament. I think that's very fair. I think they could rally around the five-star Ola Dotin, I believe that's his name, and Sean, Buzz Williams teams, they play very hard. They crash the boards and they're very energy based. I think he's bringing in guys now that he's had a full year to get situated and more time. Let's face it, Kevin Willard leaving late also opened the door to Buzz Williams starting late as well. So I think now with a full year's head start, I think this Maryland team could be a lot better. And Sean, I'll be honest with you, Maryland gets a little too much criticism. That's a raucous environment when they're good, and it's a fan base that, when good, are very passionate. And I think Buzz can. No one I think is better than Buzz, to be honest with you, Sean, at getting to a place early and regenerating fan interest. I think he can do exactly that. I think it's there. He just needs to tap into it with a proper team.
Yeah, just this team feels like it's going to fit him better, right? I don't know if last year he got like a he probably just took what was available, and obviously his number one player Pharrell Payne gets hurt. I think he's trying to come back, and I think he's going to, which is obviously huge for retention. I think he needs to get a waiver. I think let's expect that to go through. But these players fit Buzz Williams more, Joe. It's not going to be the prettiest on offense. They're not going to be scoring 100 in the Big Ten very often, but they're going to get after it a little bit more. Like these are some big guards. Wagner and Boswell, I assume, will lead the backcourt, and then if you can get Payne back. John from New Mexico is awesome. He is really, really awesome in the paint, especially posting up. Like Buzz does not have the Dan Hurley, Dusty May intricate offensive sets. Like let's throw it down to the big fella and let's get DJ Wagner downhill. I think it's going to look a lot like that. And yeah, I think it's going to look a lot more like a Buzz Williams team, which might not be super fun to watch or play against. But on one hand, it was probably not going to get worse than last year. But I like the moves that they've made so far.
And Sean, breaking news here. Donnie Freeman, the prize Syracuse transfer, commits to St. John's. So we get
Wow.
that breaking around 9:30 Eastern tonight. So that's a big acquisition for the Johnnies.
Well, the reason why that's a little bit surprising, Joe, and it did look like it was turning that way um, at the end here, but the reason why that's surprising is because he was very, very heavily rumored to go to a team that Rick Pitino used to coach before we were born, or just after we were born, in Kentucky. They're coming later with losers, but Maryland is a winner, Joe. I do think it would be irresponsible to go past the winter segment without mentioning my team. I think Indiana's been very good in the portal so far, clearly operating with a pretty high budget, but wanted to get your thoughts on what Darren DeVries and the Hoosiers have done in the portal.
I don't know if Kurt Signetti stopped them outside the basketball building or whatever, or at Three Brothers Pizza in Bloomington. But man, uh, this DeVries is acting like a man possessed. They weren't that terrible this year. We talk about it in their season recap, state of the program. So please check that video out for our full thoughts. We thought this team needed a reboot, right? I think we knew going into the year that no bigs is a huge problem. He got two really good ones, the SMU guy, Turkish guy. I will not try to butcher the last name, and then Aiden Sherrill, who I think could really do well stretching that floor. And then Bryce Lindsey, I'm a big fan of. Sean, I think Indiana could be very good right away. I think, they're a little more speculative just because we haven't seen any of these guys play together yet. But if there's a speculative team I'm going to buy into it to the Big Ten, it's the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah, there's a clear change in priority for this staff, right? There's not a single player that they have got who has not played high major basketball. That is a complete 180 from last year. Also, you've got Trent Sisley staying and three top 80 recruits. Like, this is probably going to be the team for Indiana for the most part. There might be another ad here or there, but I would say going into the year we probably have the rotation already. But this team with Ryan Carr, the former scout for the Pacers, who is now the general manager, this staff clearly went into the portal with a strategy, and really the only person that I really am aware of that they really tried to get and didn't was your new forward, JP Estrella. Quick pivot after that, and they got Aiden Sherrill. Sherrill was obviously asking for a really heavy price. He was also asking for some like offensive stuff, like he wanted to play minutes at the four. Indiana went out and got a center, Yiga Tolu. Uh, so I think that is obviously a Aiden Sherrill at the four is a huge difference from last year. And then at the guard position, Joe, they brought in four guards. They have three like combo wings coming in as freshmen, but there's a few options here, right? I don't think we know what the starting lineup is going to be. I think that might be a good thing because there's 5 or 6 players for the starting at the 2 and the 3. Burton will start at the 1, Sherrill, Yigatolu at the 4 and the 5. Those 2 and 3 are up for grabs, but you have a player who's shot it really well at Nova and James Madison and Lindsay. You've got Mustaf, who's a top 50 recruit at Georgia Tech. You have Darren Harris, who's a top 50 recruit at Duke. So it's pretty clear that this team is going to have a huge step up in talent from last year.
Yep, and I think that's exactly what they needed, Sean. I think last year, as we both knew, there was a real cap on that team, and unfortunately, they never really reached even near the cap at times. So, Indiana certainly has the highest ceilings of any spec team in the Big Ten so far.
Yep, and it's a little bit unfair, but the expectations have probably raised a little bit. I'm not sure
Yep, I
that
think second weekend is probably the expectation with that team.
I'm not sure making the tournament is enough to meet expectations now, right? They
Nope.
have, maybe it's unfair, but look, they have been given a war chest of 18 to 20 million. They are um, they're giving out a lot of money to these players, and it's up to the staff to figure it out. We're gonna figure out, Joe, if the 3 point barrage was a true system play or personnel based. Watching some Drake and West Virginia stuff over the past few weeks, I think they're going to look a lot different next year on offense. I don't think they're going to take as many threes. I think they're going to still go for high quality looks, but I think that they're going to be more well rounded. One more thing, Joe. Every single transfer that they have brought in will have at least 2 years of eligibility, which is something that was different from last year. Burton will have to get a waiver, but he'll get it. He only played 10 games this year. All but one transfer who played meaningful minutes last year only had 1 year, and that was Nick Dorn. He is in the portal, but clear change in philosophy on that regard too. But Indiana is going to look a lot different next year, and probably that's probably for good. All right, Joe. Let's maybe we can go through a few quick winners here, but because we do need to
Yep.
get to the losers. But off the
Yep.
top of my
Absolutely.
head, I think Xavier, UCLA, and Florida State are big winners. Any other quick ones from you?
Yeah, quickly, Texas, David Punch,
Yeah,
Isaiah Johnson, the two premier acquisitions. Shaw Miller not effing around in year two at Texas. I think, like I said, year two for coaches. It's kind of funny in both sports we cover, Sean, college football, college basketball. Year two is becoming really damn important, and you're seeing that with a lot of guys the way they're acting in the portal.
I'm going to add Miami also. I think Caden Lewis and Santos Cyril are
Yep.
really good. And I'm going to add Marquette too, Joe. How about this? Shaka Smart's using the transfer portal. He gets Sananda Frew from Louisville and Minnesale from St. Thomas. Marquette's going to be better than they were last year too. And one more, Joe, is Boston College. Luke Murray and the Eagles are trying to get off the floor in the ACC. I have a feeling they will. They have brought in 5 transfers from, if you follow mid-major ball up here in the Northeast, you'd recognize some of these names. If you don't, just hang in there with me for a second. They get Luke Hunger from George Washington, former Northwestern player. They get Colby Duggan from Charleston, Ernest Shelton from Merrimack, MAC Player of the Year, Money Williams from Montana, JB Frankel from Northeastern, and they get Brandon Benjamin from Fairfield, who led the country in offensive rebounds. I obviously know him a little better than most, but there is a real chance that the Eagles will be off the floor in the ACC.
Yep.
But all right, Joe, let's turn the page to losers. We mentioned one of them earlier. I think it would be pretty irresponsible to start anywhere else. Loser number one for me, Mark Pope in Kentucky. They have been involved with plenty of transfers and they've only gotten a few.
Yeah, Sean, this is probably the most shocking. And then a lot of exits too. Colin Chandler, Mohamed Diabate ends up coming to another team we'll talk about. Um, Jasper Johnson, like Brandon Garrison. It's shocking. Not only the exits, but the lack of traction to get guys even on campus. These are
Yeah.
guys that aren't even visiting. And then Rob Wright, famously enters from BYU, ends up going back. I don't know what's going on in Lexington. I think this is a booster. I think I'm gonna be honest. I think the boosters are to blame here, and I hope we don't get doxxed for this or anything crazy. They were so eager to oust Calipari. They get Mark Pope in there, who I think is a great offensive coach. I thought was pretty good at BYU, and had a pretty successful year one. Got to the Sweet 16, but ever since then, it's just been downhill for Kentucky from there. And I'll be honest, Sean. I think they need to come up with a more concrete plan. I think it's just been a kind of come as you go, and clearly it's looking to be a disaster right now. Now they have time, they have plenty of money. I'm sure they're going to get somebody or figure something out. But man, Sean, it's not looking good for the Kentucky Wildcats right now.
It seems like this is going to end badly, Joe, and I don't think it's entirely fair. But is it fair to expect your team to be championship level good every year, no matter where you are? Maybe not, right? Kentucky's obviously well funded. They did the whole transfer thing year one with a bunch of seniors because that's what they could get. And then in year two, they tried to do some freshmen, some younger players. They had a ton of injuries. Quaintance played 4 games. He was supposed to be their starting center. Jelon Lowe, their starting point guard, didn't really play, and when he did, his shoulder was not good. So A lot of things went wrong this year. They still made the tournament. But the pressure is on for Mark Pope. And for some reason, they have just not been able to close these transfers. They're on basically every list you can think of. They a couple of the situations like you said, but it seems like Kentucky doesn't really have a problem getting to the final few. But when it comes to getting them across the line, they have not done that. They do have two transfers in right now. I don't know if necessarily both of them make sense. I think one of them do on their own, but both of them know. They get Zoom Diallo from Washington, a player that we've seen for 2 years in the Big Ten with Danny Sprinkle, and then Alex Wilkins, the combo guard from Furman, who had a nice end of the season and a pretty good NCAA tournament game against UConn. But Joe, if that's the starting backcourt, I'm not sure I would have Kentucky in the top 25.
I'm not sure that team would even get into the tournament, to be
Yeah,
honest with you, Sean.
we've seen Diallo, and his stats are okay, but I'm not entirely sure he's efficient enough to win. And Wilkins is a player whose stats really do not support him going to Kentucky. He was great at the end of the year, but they're not like fast guys. They're more like they're both tall-ish, they're both long-ish. Is that going to work when you can't go around the size in the SEC and around the talent? Are you going to be able to shoot over them? I don't know. This is a little bit of a red flag for me that if these two are starting in the backcourt, you obviously get Moreno back at the five. I'm pretty sure. I really like him. I think he's an awesome player and can turn into something really great if he stays a couple years here. But it's not for a lack of trying. They've had a lot of people that they've been interested in, but they've been unable to get them in so far. And with Donnie Freeman going to St. John's, he was pretty close to going to Kentucky. Ricky P slips in at the last moment and takes him up to Queens, but obviously not the end of the season. Probably not fair to grade it yet, but it's not off to a good start.
No, and you could say something similar with another blue blood, Sean, that team that Kentucky beat in their most recent national title game. That's Kansas. They do get the commitment from Leroy Blyden Jr., who is a Detroit product. I'm a big fan of his. Think he'll help the Jayhawks a lot. But when you consider what they've lost so far here, Sean, Fiore Badunga probably being the top of that list, and then Bryson Tiller, it's really brutal right now for Kansas. We kind of saw that made for March. If you have Paramount Plus, I recommend it. Follows both Michigan and Kansas. Bill Self, in a few of those, they kind of Easter egg out that I don't know who's going to be back next year. It wasn't just Darren Peterson, right? A lot of these guys, right? He's kind of operating on a 1 year basis, not only for his retirement, but also for his team. And, even a blue blood, like two really good blue bloods like Kansas and Kentucky, who, excuse me, we've seen a lot of success for in our lifetime, they're having real trouble getting in there with a lot of these top guys are sealing the deal. And clearly it's a money thing. I'm not saying they're poor at all. I'm just saying a lot of these teams are outbidding them or outfitting them is what I should say.
I think there's a chance that Kansas might not have as much as the other Blue Bloods. And it's not a problem with Kentucky, but I think in the like Kentucky or Kansas should be in for John Blackwell. Like they should be, and they're not. They also did get Keanu Dawes from Utah. Joe, he did score. He did score a lot of points, but sort of like a small ball four. He's like 6'7", 6'8". I think he's pretty clearly a Tiller replacement. But this sort of lined up for Tiller to step into the lead forward guy, and obviously he goes to Missouri. But yeah, they're gonna have to build. They have four players right now, to my knowledge. Rosario, and they have some freshmen too. Rosario and Mbia, two reserve forwards, are coming back. If one of them has to start, that's probably not a good thing. Look, I think they can play their roles off the bench, but you get Blyden, you get Dawes, but with a combination of some seniors and some transfers out, this is going to be a blue and red team that looks a lot different next year. And then there is a chance that they add Tyron Stokes. Not entirely sure where he goes at this point. That recruitment has been very odd. Um, it's probably either Kansas or Kentucky, but Kansas also does bring in four pretty highly ranked players. Joe, they get Tay Kinney, Davion Atkins, Trent Perry, and Luke Barnett, all kind of in that 1 through 3 range. I'm not sure any of them can play forward, but look, if you're relying on all those guys to be meaningful contributors, it might be a little bit of a tough season. But like we said with Kentucky, a lot of room, a lot of time to go here. But I think Kansas needs to make a splash.
Yep. Now, Sean, I don't want to go too much into this team quite yet because it is, I guess, a new regime for all intents and purposes. LSU, right? They do get the commitment from Diabate today, but
He's their only
really tough
player.
sledding so far for Will Wade. I mean, he
Yeah.
is the one singular player on that roster, and a lot of people are going to make their criticisms about how they treated Matt McMahon and how Will Wade lied and blah blah whatever. The bottom line is, though, they have one player, and for an athletic department that has crazy high expectations, we've seen their behaviors with Lane Kiffin, Brian Kelly, even that coaching search, Kim Mulkey, Jay Johnson, the baseball coach. You know, they get immediate like traction. Right now, I'm not seeing any of that quite yet for LSU. Now, still early. I still think they're going to fill out. They'll clearly have a team next year, but it might not be the year one team talent wise he had at NC State. In fact, I'd be shocked if it's even half the talent NC State had last year.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, Joe, because like, and I guess it's hard to put together a staff and try and build your team at the same time, but it hasn't been for some other coaches, right? I think this, like, they clearly made a significant financial investment in Will Wade, pulling him away from NC State. It was a buyout, all that. That has not been a problem for them. They were able to move on from those coaches, like you said, and get proven coaches at other places, right? And I just think it's going to be really hard for Will Wade to have like a great season year one. Can he scrap together a group that gets to the tournament where he goes, 7-11 in a loaded SEC? Maybe, but yeah, hard to put them anywhere else other than the losers column so far, being that they had 0 players until about an hour or two ago. All right, I got some other losers, Joe, here, and I think one of them hits a little bit close to home if you grew up where we did, and that's if I can pull up the Big East here, I can't find it, but Seton Hall, right? They have a pretty solid season, a nice bounce back after one of their worst seasons ever, but they have once again lost just about everybody. They lose Bud Clark to Ole Miss, Najai Hines to UConn, Ari Harine, Simpkins, Fisher, Felton, Dar, Payne, and Rivera are all in the portal. Now, they do have a couple of transfers in, but Joe, I think this year had a lot of building blocks for Shaheen and the Pirates, and it looks like just about everybody with eligibility is choosing to play elsewhere next year.
Yeah, pretty brutal look for Coach Holloway and Seton Hall, and I don't think it's a program that does for lack of trying, but clearly they're poachable. And the unfortunate reality, Sean, is we hold the Big East to a high standard, and I think the UConns and St. John's will preserve that. But Villanova, who not so recently won a national title, Seton Hall, who has been a very respectable program for most of our life, they're getting ravaged by everyone. And even Georgetown to a lesser extent, right? Not quite the success yet with Ed Cooley, but it's pretty brutal to see for the Pirates. And you don't really know because they haven't had a lot of consistent playing like players under Coach Holloway yet. He's about to enter year five, I believe, Sean. And I don't really know if I have a significant player that he recruited, developed, and that stayed there. That's very unfortunate.
Yeah, and really the only person that comes to mind, Joe, is Casey and Defo, who he brought over from St. Peter's and played for him for 5 years and all that. But I think they have a play style that is conducive to winning in the Big East, sort of regardless of who you have. Like, they get after it defensively. And they had a horrible offense this year, and they were still pretty close to the tournament. Like, the way forward for him is probably to just get like the mid-major all-stars from the Northeast every year. Stepping stone up to the top. Like, okay. Now Simeon Wilcher is coming back. They got him from Texas. He started at St. John's. He's from Roselle, played at Roselle Catholic. He's going to finish up pretty close to home. They get Del Jones from Radford, who did start somewhere else, if I'm not mistaken, Clemson. So he's a guy that's a really good player. And then they get Roddy Anderson from Xavier today. So they're starting to fill in the guard position a little bit. I think with Holloway's coaching style that bigs will turn into better players. But unfortunately for them, Najai Hines, who was a project year one, showed enough potential to get $4.5 million from UConn. So it's going to be a struggle again, but I'm not totally writing them off yet. It's just a really tough situation that they've found themselves in here. They have had a bunch of really good players that have decided to go elsewhere and continue to be really good. So that just might have to be the lane that they find themselves in here. Get a bunch of mid-major all-stars and see if you can intercept them on their way to the top.
Absolutely, Sean. Before we get kind of into the some more storylines, individual player storylines at least, is there any other losers that you wanted to bring to the masses? A lot of people might call out a Michigan State, for example, or a or a Purdue, but it's like those teams are pretty built up as is, and
Yeah,
they rely a lot on high school recruiting. So those teams I wouldn't consider losers at all.
yeah. If you return like a lot of the players that you can and have a good recruiting class, like I don't think you can. It can really be a loser. Like you can draw the transfer portal, you can tie the transfer portal, but I don't know if you can lose it really. And I think
Yeah.
that Michigan State and Purdue, for that matter, Joe, haven't really been in or out to my knowledge. Nobody important has been in or out of both those places. I think one in for both those teams will probably be the end of it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think maybe a little disappointing, but I don't know if loser is enough. But Joe, we do have a couple of storylines that have not finalized yet. Let's go over a couple of the top players in the portal that are still uncommitted and where they are leaning. It is pretty clear that the number, I'm just going by on three here, the highest ranked player in the portal that is not committed, Milan Momcilovic. Very likely, I think he stays in the draft.
I agree. He's slated top 20. I think that 50% three-point shot might get him even higher, and perhaps doing that just to see how crazy a number he could get. But Sean, I don't know if teams are willing to spend that number, which is probably double what
Yeah.
Yaxel Lendeborg got. And I'll tell you, Yaxel got anywhere from 3.5 to 4.2. Maybe not exactly double that, but it's got to be close to doubling that. So I don't think teams are really necessarily setting that aside in
Yeah.
the anticipation he might come back. I think that'd be crazy.
And the team that reportedly pulled him into the portal, Florida, they just got all their bigs to come back. So I'm not sure where. I don't think the money that was potentially there for him is there anymore. It's going to be going to Condon or Haw. Chinyelu has entered as well and maintained his eligibility. So I would think that Momcilovic goes. All right, number three here on the rankings, Joe, is Masamba Diop from Arizona State. It's pretty clearly between Gonzaga and St. John's here. Don't know if there's much to go about there. Number four is Juke Harris. Obviously, hits a little bit close to home for you. It's pretty clear that three teams have been pretty involved here: Carolina, Tennessee, Michigan. It looked like Michigan was going to get them. Then North Carolina took the lead. Then Tennessee took the lead. Has Michigan come from behind and taken the lead again?
I think as of now, Tennessee still leads, but it's like the horse is closing in, and it depends. We don't know when this race ends. I think the longer this race ends, the horse that's catching up Michigan has a lot more steam to go because Michigan doesn't necessarily need Juke. I think
Yeah.
Tennessee still try to fill out that roster based on, the limited comments I'm getting from Tennessee message boards and people plugged in there. Uh, I think they really want him, but I don't think Duke necessarily really wants them quite yet. So I think the longer this goes, the better for Michigan and Tennessee. It's not like they haven't been aggressive with other people. If they get someone else to commit, Duke might be left, not necessarily, but no choice. But the choice might be made up for Duke just to head to Michigan.
Yeah, I think that appears to be like the way that Michigan is going forward here. Like they will be patient. They have the core of their team. If they need to wait until after the NBA draft withdrawal deadline, they'll do it. And I'm not sure these other two teams will because they have a lot of spots to fill. And like you said for Momcilovic, Joe, who's going to be holding that much money available that late? I think Michigan wins a waiting game if it becomes one. So we'll have to see what happens there with Wake Forest's Juke Harris. All right, number 5 on the list, Joe, is John Blackwell from Wisconsin. Been a number of names involved here. He went out to visit UCLA, and then all the coaches that were in on him followed him out there and visited him in Los Angeles. Didn't want to let Mick get him, but
His charming personality is scary.
it appears that there's been somebody who's taken the lead here, and there's been some predictions made. Nothing official yet, but it looks like John Blackwell will be headed to Raleigh Durham to play for Duke.
Yeah, and John Shire gets a premier transfer. And Sean, this is a bit surprising. Early on, there were a lot of rumors, message board rumors, for whatever that's worth in Big Ten country, that he was entering, that Michigan was tampering. Now, I don't know how true that is one way or another. Clearly didn't help Michigan. Didn't
Yeah,
even get a
Michigan was
visit
never
from them.
really. It didn't appear that Michigan was ever really
No, they were
in this.
mentioned and floated. Who knows what
Yeah,
happened through back channels? But his main interest seemed to be Illinois and Duke. And kind of shocked that UCLA came in late. Thought there was a real chance there. And I know there's some Detroit ties. Samaj Morgan, a former Michigan football player, kind of tight with him. Anyway, uh, John Blackwell looks like he's heading to play for Duke. I'm shocked too because Illinois, I believe his dad played for Illinois, so kind
yeah,
of a legacy angle there. But regardless, I think good news for the Big Ten that he's heading out of the conference. He's ravaged the conference. Him and Nick Boyd or him and John Taji have beaten, I think, every team in this conference, to be quite honest with you, Sean. So I think teams are not so sad to see him leave.
yeah. When it appeared to me, Joe, and this is just guessing, but I think it may have become a choice at Illinois to get Stojakovic or to pursue Blackwell. And I think when they chose Stojakovic, the path to Duke became very clear for Blackwell. Now, he's not committed yet, but all signs are pointing there. It should probably happen in the next day or so. But yeah, I am not too disappointed that he's out of the Big Ten. We don't need him.
No, not at all.
We don't need him doing that. All right, down the list we go. We have Alan Graves, the Santa Clara transfer. He is in the NBA draft as well. There's nothing really on him here, Joe. I think Kentucky's expected to be involved here, but anything else happening with Alan Graves?
No, kind of one of the tougher recruitments
Yeah.
in this cycle to read.
He
You
didn't
know,
even start for Santa Clara most of the time.
Yeah, so very interesting to say the least. Another one that's tough is Paulius Muraskis. You figured he's going to commit to Arizona State to play for Coach Bennett, his old coach at St. Mary's, but not really a great read there. And Sean, a lot of these later on reads, Donnie Freeman just committed to St. John's, we mentioned Paul McNeil, like a lot of these come out of nowhere when it happens. Some camps decide to be very quiet, which I think is probably the way to go, because back channels. Back channels tend to actually give you a decent amount of money. Maybe not the most like a Flory Badugo would get, but it ain't like the back channels are being quiet because they want less money. They're being quiet because they probably want more and don't want other people hearing a ridiculous number and exiting the bidding process.
And that usually is the agent's doing, and the agent isn't the player. Like, the agent could be going around saying, hey, what can you do for me? Oh, you can give me 3 million. Well, the player's like, you know what? Like, this coach can be 2.5, and I'd rather play for him. So I think the introduction of agents here has made things a little bit more interesting and has added to the fact that you can't believe everything that you hear because the agent might be shopping without the actual client's knowledge. Another number 13 here on 3, Joe, is Mustafa Cham from Cincinnati, the 7-1 center from Africa. He was an incredible player this year for Cincinnati. I was incredibly impressed. Looks like Michigan is in the lead for Cham.
Yeah, I think it's a two-horse race between St. John's and Michigan, and depending what happens with Masamba Diop, uh, who really knows? Diop commits to St. John's. I think Michigan's the clear front runner there. Was on campus today being Monday. So interesting to see if Dusty May can close the deal. I think that signifies that Mara is out at Michigan. Perez Johnson likely coming back, but we don't quite have the clearest read on that yet. But Michigan State and Kentucky and Arkansas are rumored to be somewhat involved here. I don't know to what extent. He hasn't visited Michigan State. He'll have plenty of chances to do that here, Sean, in the coming hours if he really wants to play for Thomas. So Andrew Bucky did just visit there. And then Arkansas and Kentucky, like we said, Kentucky's not necessarily going to be unhappy with bodies, and Arkansas don't have quite have a read yet. But Michigan, kind of the team to beat for both Juke and Cham. So gonna be real interesting to see what happens in the coming hours. But I think Cham's the more immediate threat to commit
Yeah,
anywhere.
yeah, Joe, I'm super, super high on Chum. I think he's a Big Ten Player of the Year candidate, first team, all conference capable. If you get one of those two, I think you're probably number one overall in the preseason. And if you get both, well, might have some more of the same as this year because those are you're returning a lot too. Even if it's no Mara, you get Cadeau back, Merez back, like you get you know you have who else coming back? That might be it.
McKenney.
McKenney. So if you can add, two awesome players to that, like man, Michigan's going to be pretty good next year. And look, even if you just get one of them, I'd still be pretty excited. But if you can get both, might be a problem. You mentioned the two, or mentioned one of the two NC State guys, Paul McNeil and Matt Abel. They have been rumored just about everywhere. I think the big names are obviously in for them. Um, Other than that, Joe, or Terrence Brown, the Utah transfer, started at FDU. I think he is leaning Kansas right now, but I think all the big names are in for him too. It is a little bit of slim pickings if you're looking for like an all conference type player right now. Plenty of depth pieces still out there, but after the names that we just mentioned, I think it becomes fill out your roster time.
Yeah, and Sean, I don't know if we should talk about this on air, but there's been a heavy rumor that a player with the initial CA might enter the transfer portal silently or whatever it is. Hasn't quite happened yet. The deadline is tomorrow as we shoot this. So interesting to see what happens there with Christian Anderson. That's been
Yeah,
a
that has been
prevalent rumor.
publicly a rumor. Um, would be a little bit shocking. You'd have to expect the same sort of names involved with him, Joe, if he does pop. Which we did hear that a couple days ago, and he hasn't officially entered yet, so not entirely sure. Um, Other than that, I am scrolling down the list here trying to find some more. Fulgaris likely to go to Louisville. I think we already talked about that. And then we have a few other names, but nothing really to get into. So obviously, transfer portal season is really really fun to follow. It's also really fast. So people these are kids. They've got to be making their decisions for the next year plus of their life within a couple of days. Um, so it is interesting and fun from a fan's point of view that you could potentially have, um, your entire roster built over the course of the next few weeks. So, Joe, unless you got anything else to add, I think we'll wrap it up here.
No, Sean, and what's crazy is something could change the next 2 hours that makes this whole well, or a decent amount of this video invalid. So interesting to see what happens.
Yep, we're gonna fire this thing out right now, Monday night, and then hopefully it becomes good enough for at least the next day or two. So, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.